Well, here's how we run the Keystoker automatic coal stove. You keep your coal outside where it can stay wet, and you put this big plastic bin in the wheelbarrow and scoop coal into it with that pail down there, and then you bring the bin over to the door and just slide it across the floor and leave it in this vicinity here. And then you can scoop coal out of the bin with that same pail, and this is obviously the hopper right here. You just dump the coal in there. If you want, you can wear a little dust mask. Again, the idea is to keep the coal wet so it doesn't dust up as much. I usually don't fill the hopper all the way up because it gets pretty heavy. Generally, you want it, 2/3, 3/4 full, whatever works for you, depending on your schedule. It needs to be filled up with maybe a pail or two pretty much daily when the weather is pretty cold, and obviously feeds through right there. This is an automatic and manual select switch, and if you look closely you can read it. It pretty much always wants to be operated with the little white switch pulled out on the automatic setting. If it's not feeding right with the thermostat, then you may have bumped that and pushed it into manual. So that little white switch always needs to be out. Obviously put the lid back on the hopper as soon as you finish filling it. This is where all the action happens down here. That's the burn grate inside there. And you want about that much coal or so in there to start a coal fire. And that's a little igniter pack sitting in the middle of it. And that coal should ideally be dry, stuff that's already been in here and saved. And you light that fuse and it'll start sparking, and I usually leave this main door open for a few minutes, and you're going to get some smoke out in the hallway here. I usually close the steel door while I'm doing this and open the outside door and close the other doors so the fumes can get out. And after you're confident that that little igniter pack is pretty well lit, then you close up this door and the bottom door, and you go over here and you see that plug down there in the back. There is no on-off control on the stove. It's either plugged in to be on, or you unplug it to turn it off. If there's ever any kind of emergency, you just pull that plug and the thing will shut down by itself very quickly. Coal fires go out in a hurry on their own, and they're very difficult to light. This is the ash pan down here, and you just situate it just like that. What you want ideally is about 2 inches of ash formed right on the end of the burn grate, and it just dumps itself automatically down into the ash pan. I use this stick here to punch the ash down once a day. Compresses the ash and saves a whole lot of emptying the stove. And obviously this door gets closed too. They both have little wedges on them that keep them shut. You don't have to jam them too hard, just as long as you make sure they're closed. And always obviously wear gloves because this gets fairly hot. One other important control, everything else down here you shouldn't have to mess with at all. You see that little orange screw right there? That is the feed control screw right there. And it's just a little bit of a design flaw with these stoves, but it tends to back itself out slightly over a week or two. Ideally, that wants to be backed out about 4 full turns from completely closed. So you screw it in clockwise all the way, and then back it out 4 complete revolutions, give or take. I mean, that's you assess your feed rate based on how much ash you've got in the front of the burn grate. As I said, you want about 2 inches or so. If you want it to feed more, you turn it in clockwise, like 3 full turns out. If you want it to feed less, 5 turns out or so. But you need to check that every couple of weeks, because if it's not feeding enough coal, that's the issue. And you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot force that screw. That thing is going to move in and out when the thing is plugged in and feeding coal, and depending on the part of its cycle, it's either going to be tight or loose. You only want to turn that screw when it's feeling loose. Don't force that screw at all. Very important. So that's that, and as I said, everything else down here is automatic, just a couple of blowers. And the thermostat is right here on the wall. You just set that, when you first light it, you want to set it about 10 degrees higher than the ambient temperature. The temperature you want is on the top part of the dial, and the ambient temperature is on the bottom. That's about it, other than make sure you leave this door open. Never have all these doors closed when the stove is in operation. This one always has to be open, otherwise it'll get real hot in this hallway area. So be sure not to close it off. It's pretty important. And to clean this thing, you need a shop vac. And you open up this has to be done at least once a winter when you get a thaw. You just unplug it, shut it down, let it cool down for 2-3 hours. And you have to reach all inside here. It's a little hard to see in this light, but all the surfaces inside, you just scrape them real hard with a little thick fitting on the shop vac hose, and just suck all the ash and stuff up out of here. And because that ash tends to insulate the stove after a month or two, and you won't get as much radiant heat coming out of it. So, and when you do that, be very careful not to suck this insulation gasket off the two doors. Don't touch those with a vacuum. Just the metal surfaces and so forth, and that's how that works. So good luck, and that's the Keystoker stove.